I'm happy to see that we have enough people here in order to pilot an Intrepid class starship. We're enough for a bridge crew here. I'm actually going to be passing the baton to Kelli as the captain today of this crew as we talk about an amazing subject, which is basically about game mastering. I'm hoping that by the end of this video, we're all hoping that by the end of this video, that you will feel more comfortable picking up the mantle of game mastering, because we actually have some amazing game masters here today. And I get to be interviewed today because I've been game mastering for 30 years. I'm that guy who always wants to be a player and never can be. And so we're going to pass it over to Kelli and pull all this wisdom out of this group here.
And I get the honor of learning from all of you today. So we'll start off by just introducing ourselves. If you can let us know, who you are and your connection to STA. And Derek, do you want to go first?
Hi, I'm Derek Tyler Attico. I am a Star Trek Strange New Worlds two-time winner, thankfully. I'm also working with Modiphius Games and this illustrious panel, Jim Johnson, Kelli Fitzpatrick here, on Star Trek Adventures. And in regards to gaming, I'm a pretty much lifelong gamer, started really young in high school, and I've been a player and a game master, and I'm excited to get this going. Thanks, Kelli.
Awesome. Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim Johnson, also a Strange New Worlds writer back in the day, 3 times, 7, 9, and 10, I think. And eventually ended up with Modiphius being the project manager for Star Trek Adventures. So I'm in charge of the line right now. I'm who gives all these folks assignments, and they deliver great, awesome material. So I'm very grateful that they're all on board with me for this game. I've been a gamer for as long as I can remember, back since my early teenage years, starting with the D&D Red Box and going from there, playing all kinds of different games. Lately, more game master than player, although I do try to have opportunities to do both. But most of my experience has been as a game master or game master / player in co-GM type of games.
Thank you. Patrick.
My name is Patrick Goodman. I've been a Trekkie as long as I can remember. I've been gaming since like 1980 on both sides of the screen. I've been working with Star Trek Adventures and Jim here since the playtest started. I've written a few things here and there for the line. Hope to keep doing it.
Awesome. Michael.
Hi, of course, I co-run the blog Continuing Mission, where I love showcasing the super fans and keeping the pump up for Star Trek Adventures. I'm also a freelance writer now, heeding Jim's call for new and diverse writers. I was happy he put that call out there, and so I was able to benefit with that and have some modules out and coming out also. I was a hardcore Marvel RPG game master for nearly 30 years, and in 2017, I got converted to Star Trek Adventures, much to the chagrin of my Marvel players, because I was like, wait a second, this mechanic is amazing. So I just digested STA, and I'm proud to be here today talking about game mastering and getting other people to become game masters.
Awesome. And I'm Kelli Fitzpatrick. I am also a winner of the Strange New Worlds contest and a proud contributing writer to Star Trek Adventures. And I started playing Star Trek Adventures recently within the last couple of years and am an aspiring game master. So I'm just as excited as our audience hopefully is to chat about this topic today. So if you all would like to start out by just sort of talking about what would you say are like the basic steps in the game mastering process? So if you were to sort of break it down, and this might vary from person to person, but like what are the different steps that you go through in preparing to run a game, whether it be Star Trek Adventures or something else, and anybody can jump in.
I'll go first. I'll just put it out there. So a simple 1, 2, 3 for me is that I always select the difficulty level before we play. So I think about the players. Are they new? Are they fresh? Do they like rolling dice? Do they not like rolling dice? So I really think about that group and then base the difficulty of the campaign. If they're new, if you run them through too hard, into the game the first time, you're going to ruin their experience. So that's why I try to really see, are they seasoned or not? Then I also look at the player sheets to see what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, so I can play off that, which goes into number 3, is I determine the encounter. So I really am specific, like, what are the cut scenes here? Just like a director in a movie, I'm like, where are we going to end up? And those are the 3 basic frameworks, 3 points I use to create the basic framework.
Well, Michael just took care of everything for us, so
there we go. Yeah.
That's it.
All right.
Great panel. Yeah.
I guess I would say be a player first. If you want a game master but you've never played, be a player first. Learn the game, and then I would say, I guess because I come from a story background, work your story, work it well, plot it out. But then be prepared to throw it out, because players do that. They will go off book, and that's okay. Don't get upset when that happens. That will actually add to the game, not take away from it. And I guess the last thing I would say is, especially when you play with people you know, sometimes you have the desire to maybe focus on one particular character because you really like that character or like that story, and that's cool. But give everyone quality time, because they're all there to play, just like you're there to game master. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Derek said, players are going to play, so be prepared to think fast. But it's always best. Excuse me. As Derek said, start out as a player. Learn the system. If you are that unfortunate soul who has to jump in and be the GM for the first time because nobody else is going to do it, grab a couple of key things. For Star Trek Adventures, learn the very basic task mechanic and the threat momentum currency, and worry about throwing in the extra stuff later.
Yeah, I was gonna say that as well. I was gonna take it up a level and say that certainly encourage you to play the game first if you can. But I know that, just having been on social media for this game for a long time now, that there are a lot of people who are like, I've got a group, we want to try out Star Trek Adventures. No one else is willing to step up to be the game master, either because they don't know the setting, or as well as they think they should, or they want to, or they don't know the game. And so I think what my advice would be is sure, play it if you can, but if you haven't had the opportunity to play it yet, and you don't watch all the tons of videos that are available for other gamers that are playing it, like what Patrick said, learn the very, very basic task resolution. Like as a game master, it's on you to determine what the task difficulty is, right? So this thing that your players are attempting, is it super easy? It could be like a difficulty 0 or a difficulty 1 task, or is it fairly hard? And if you figure out, okay, what do I need to do to assign a difficulty to something, and then figure out, how do I tell my players which attribute and discipline to use, that's all you really need. Like, basic task resolution is the very first thing you need. And once you've got that in your head, it's just a matter of figuring out, like, what kind of story do you want to tell? And Kelly, I wasn't sure if your question was, how do we plan a specific episode versus how do I plan out an entire campaign and then invite players into it and then play it? So I'll go with the assumption that you were talking about. Well, actually, I'll just ask, what was it how to plan out a discrete session, or how to plan a whole campaign as a game master?
I think I was thinking a single session.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's the best way to start. I want to bounce off of Jim, something he said. I'll give you some advice right now, new game masters. In your very first encounter, and you're playing Star Trek Adventures for the first time, do not do Starship Battle. Do not. Because that's a little bit more complex. So if you're familiar with Star Trek, if not, watch a couple episodes of a show, have them beam down to a planet and do some simple interactions. But to both Patrick's point and Jim's point, pick something simple, focus on maybe just their focuses and their talents, and a couple physical challenges, just so everyone gets into the flow of the game.
So Jim, if you were going to plan out maybe a one-shot or just a single session, if folks are like, I want to start out, with a smaller chunk, what are maybe the things that they need to keep in mind?
So if I knew I was going into it to run a one shot, like a convention type game, or just a kind of like a sample couple of hours for somebody, or for a group of people who are like, I'm curious about the game, but I don't want to commit to anything longer. Just give me a taste. I would probably either grab one of the pre-written adventures that we already have available. Probably Kobayashi Maru, honestly, because it's free. And it's probably one of the few stories in Star Trek that has gotten kind of like broader social awareness, right? Because of Star Trek 2 and like Kobayashi Maru, it seems to be really common and popular. But it's also something that you can tell your players, hey, I want to run the Kobayashi Maru. Go watch the first 20 minutes of Star Trek 2, right? It's available on streaming. You can find it anywhere. It's not hard to get. I'm sure there's clips of it on YouTube and etc. So if you give the players just kind of like a sense of what they're going to do, or you could just throw them into it, right? You can say, okay, you're all brand new cadets, fresh out of the academy. You're going to go do this. You're visiting each other in the cafeteria or whatever. Get an opportunity to do a little bit of role playing, and then, or just throw them right into it and say, okay, you're on the bridge. Things are happening. You got a distress signal from the Kobayashi Maru. It's in distress. Go check it out, and then just pull them through it that way, and just have fun. I think as a game master, especially a new game master, like I'd want to familiarize myself with the material that I'm going to be running them, so that I can add a little bit as needed. And I know that sounds easier than it really is, because like I remember my early GMing days was horrifying, because it's like, what happens if the players do something that isn't on the tracks, right? What if they go off script? And then you just have to remember, oh, wait a minute, there isn't a script. You're making the script as you go, because this is a collaborative storytelling game. And so the game master kind of can come up with like the inciting incident, the high level concept, like how do I get them into the game and get started? And then pretty much everything from there is reacting to what the players do, in addition to throwing them curves every now and then. In fact, I think it's the old script writing concept. You get your heroes into a tree, right? And then you start throwing rocks at them and while they're still up in the tree. So, you make things worse. And then you just see what happens. You kind of, you give them opportunities to get out of their problem. And the players themselves will either make it worse by attempting things or failing, by using the dice mechanics. They might fail at a task, or they might complicate things. And then you just build and build and build. And then eventually you can help them get out by using NPCs and other circumstances, or they'll figure it out, right? And then you come to a satisfying conclusion somehow, or maybe not, right? Who knows? I'll stop there because I think I've gotten off track. But someone else jump in, please.
Our goal, Jim, is to make them want to get off this.
Yeah.
Grab the book and Game Master.
Oh, I think, ultimately, I think it's don't rely on a written path, right? Like you might write out a whole episode, but don't assume that you're going to just do that entire episode from A to Z, and your players are just going to go along with it, because you have to give the players agency and opportunity to make meaningful decisions that are going to have an impact on the story. And as a game master, you have to be flexible enough to change things up, right? Like if the players do something that, like if you come up with a story that has choice A and choice B, you have to know that your players are going to find option C and option D, and are going to want to do that, and you have to be flexible enough to say, oh yeah, yes, and do something else.
Yeah, I remember the mistake I made when I was 15 years old starting a Game Master is I wanted to be a comic book writer. So what I thought I was doing initially was letting them play in my comic book. So I already knew the ending and where I wanted characters to go. And then very shortly I had a player who used to actually babysit me. So he was 30 years older than me, and he would play, and he would throw chaos into the game, so much so that his character became named Chaos, because it taught me, oh, he's keeping me on the ropes, and he's watching what I think is going to happen, and he's purposely disrupting it just to get ahead of me on the game. And so for a new game master, you're not a comic book writer, you're not writing a novel, you're playing a game with people, and you're storytelling together. It just happens that you're the set designer. And they're the actors, and so that's one of the things I had to get out of my mind too. Was what pointed out to Jim, is they're always going to pick C, D, or E. Yeah.
If they don't progress to like H, I've had players run me. It's like the one of the things I've had issues with in my local game is I've got a very broad path of experience in Star Trek I've got, the guy that's playing our ship's captain has been watching since he was 3, and he's constantly going, well, why don't we do this? It's like, because if everybody else in Starfleet has forgotten that Kirk did this 30 years ago, then please forget this, because they weren't really thinking about continuity 55 years ago. All the way down to my 2 oldest kids, who have some experience with Star Trek, but they have not seen everything by any stretch of the imagination. So finding ways to balance the player's experience and expectations becomes a very interesting game. My son, he basically is kind of a force of chaos, and he just wants to do things every now and then. He's autistic. He has focus issues. So trying to keep him on task can be a challenge. But for the most part, we let him do his thing. He knows some of the original series movies that he's paid attention to, and animated series. So you got to kind of balance that, which, like I said, that's been the biggest challenge for me, is keeping lifetime Trekkie on this end, and kid who's watched most of one series on the other, and balancing their expectations, because like I say, Tack, our captain, he kind of expects things to go a certain way, and not everybody expects that. So
yeah, and that might be like one of the maybe barriers to entry that new GMs might feel is do they really need to be hardcore experts on Star Trek to game master a game in STA? Is it okay to have players of varying experiences within the universe? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and in fact, there was just a conversation about this the other day on one of the many social feeds. I don't remember which one, but someone mentioned, hey, I want to get into STA, or am I? Is it a requirement that the game master be the person in the group who knows the most about Star Trek? I think that was the idea, right? And it's like, well, sure. I mean, it doesn't hurt, but ultimately, what we're trying to do is for this panel, right? We're trying to break down the barriers to be a GM. And I think, no, you don't have to be the person in the group who knows the most about Star Trek, but you do have to be the person in the room who can facilitate the game for everybody else there. And you also need to be able to be enough of a people person that you can establish ground rules for the game and then make it consistent, right? So if you tell everybody, like if your captain is the one who's the most knowledgeable about Star Trek, but they don't want to be the game master, they want to be the captain, then you just need to work with him or her or whoever, and the rest of the players, and say, okay, here's what Star Trek means to us for the purposes of this group, right here, and put some sort of boundary around it so that you all have a common framework. So even if most of your players haven't watched everything or read everything, which is fine, because who can do that? Right? Because there's so much Star Trek.
There's a bunch.
There's a lot, yeah. So I think if you can be the type of person who can establish some ground rules with your group, even if you don't know a lot about Star Trek, say, I know enough about Star Trek, here's what I know about Star Trek, and here's how this game is going to be conducted, right, within these frameworks. And then, as game master, as you continue to learn Star Trek, you can add more to your game. But I think just as a personality, you need to kind of be able to manage people and manage expectations. But no, I don't think the game master has to be the most knowledgeable one. I think in my experience, it's just kind of worked out that way, that either myself or my co-GM were the ones who knew Star Trek the best. And so we just kind of ended up being the game masters, and oftentimes the captain or the first officer, because in general, you want your quote unquote leadership roles to be knowledgeable enough so that if you get into a situation, you kind of intuitively know whether something's going to be a court martial offense or not, or would Starfleet actually do that? But even then, if your ground rules for your game say, we can kind of circle around that, then yeah, go for it. Just figure out what Star Trek means to you and your group, and then work that plan, right? Don't worry about everything else. Don't worry about 55 years of continuity, because you can learn that in due course if you want to.
That way lies madness.
That's what's cool though about STA is that, I mean, we all know it, but you don't have to. You don't have to know all that 55 years. It doesn't matter what era. It really doesn't. I'm saying to the players, it really doesn't. Trust what we're saying here. You could have watched one episode. You could have watched half an episode of Star Trek. The rest you could have gotten from, just social media or whatever, and you could have an idea of what Star Trek is. And then you read the STA rules, and then you could go off and running, because STA creates the universe in the world of Star Trek. And you're in that world. But in that world, you're not always doing all the Star Trek things. Sometimes you're just having a cup of coffee and something may happen and you're encountering that, or you're just on a world and something happens. So don't worry, like these, like Jim and Patrick and Kelly and Michael, everybody's saying to you, don't worry about that, because STA actually prepares for that in a sense and kind of holds your hand and saying, hey, you don't have to know Star Trek. You can just know a little bit, and you can, as much as you know is fine with us, because it really concentrates on story. And then when you get to the mechanics of the game are there to assist you, but they don't slow down your story. They don't slow down your gameplay. They assist your story and gameplay.
Well, and let me add to that. Here's what I'm always trying to find a way out. Like, man, if I screw up and I forget some Star Trek canon, what do I do? But to Derek's point, if you just want to play a science fiction game in the future with cool technology and you want a basic gaming system to run that, you could use this gaming system to do that. Now, maybe you love Star Trek, but your players don't know anything about it, or vice versa. Maybe you're a game master and don't know anything about it. Run the game, because what's going to happen, you're going to want to start learning a little bit more, like, what is that? What is that? And over time, you're going to research. You're going to find out about Memory Alpha, the website. You're going to see Continuing Mission. You're going to watch some TV shows. And then here's the out. Oh my goodness, you were in an alternate reality the entire time trying to get back to the real Star Trek universe. There's so many ways you can take this game. If you do want to, there's two shows that I would say watch if you've never seen a Star Trek before and you want to start game mastering. You can watch Voyager Episode 1, Season 1, because you're going to get a flavor of all of a sudden, here's Starfleet Protocol, but then they're alone. Now what do? That's a great way to start a show. And then Picard is the very first vigilante show we're seeing. So these are all vigilantes out working outside of Starfleet on the edges of the universe, doing whatever it takes to survive. And that's a kind of RPG a lot of people like to play, more pirate-based games. So those are two shows I would recommend watching if you want to say, okay, I get it. I get how to play this game. And then just use the rules to guide it.
And I would add, I'm going to say this as a very biased person because I've contributed to these books, but the STA books have so much art and lore and things built into them that even just as you're sort of reading the rules, you're going to absorb so much of the Star Trek ethos that you can then choose to use that or not. So yeah, it's very accessible, I would say, from a player perspective, but also from a game mastering perspective. What about folks who have game mastering experience on other systems or in other games? Maybe they're coming from D&D or from other systems into STA, the 2D20 system, but also the Star Trek universe. What advice would you give those folks as they're making that shift? What should they keep in mind?
I'll just say it real quick. Mine's pretty quick. This is narrative storytelling in a way I've never seen before. I've never seen every other game I've ever played, 5 different other systems, roll the dice and know the mechanics and boom, boom, bam. This one, people don't want to roll dice. They really want to talk their way out of problems. And I just find that fascinating. It's made the best storytelling I've seen.
And I think I would add to that, if you've game mastered before, then you've already wrapped your head around storytelling in this medium. And STA was the beautiful thing about STA is it is very much like the Federation of Planets and Infinite Diversity, Infinite Combination. It allows for all different types of people to come to this game from all different places of gameplay. So if you've game mastered before, the 2D20 system is really cool. It's really easy. Like we said, it doesn't get in the way of gameplay. If you've never done it before, it's great for you. And if you look at this from the opposite end, let's say you've game mastered your whole life, you're like, oh, that Star Trek thing, who cares about that? And you're like, I'll get into it. Then you can get into STA, and now, if you like it, and which, I presume you will, if you like it, you have 55 years of material to pull from. What other role-playing game has 55 years of TV shows, books, and films to pull from for your stories? Come on, this is
Marvel.
For real, right? I mean, this is.
Let me get my thoughts together. So, of course, there are certainly other narrative RPG systems and games out there, and there are also plenty of other games that are more miniatures heavy and more very, very rules focused. Like you need to know the specific rules for reach and flanking and attacks of opportunity and blah blah blah. There's just so much stuff, right? There's some game systems have extremely detailed rules that especially for combat. And I'm thinking of D&D and Pathfinder and some other ones, and which is great. Right? These are great games for a very specific type of gameplay experience, right? I've played a lot of D&D in my years, and as hard as I've tried as a game master and as a player to make it more narrative, because that's really how my players and I tend to think is in the narrative storytelling kind of sense. Like the game system for us, not globally, because I'm trying to be very careful not to disparage any game system, because they're all great in different ways. But we've really struggled with some of these systems because the mechanics kind of got in the way, right? To do a cool thing, you had to roll, a 20 or something, or there was just no way conceptually in the game system to make it fit. And a more narrative system like STA, like you can do literally like whatever your players come up with, just narrate it, give them a difficulty, and did they succeed or fail? Did they create some complications that maybe they succeeded but something else happened, right? It's that classic, Luke shoots the lock on the door to seal the door, but that control panel also controlled the extending bridge. Well, shoot, so now he's made a complication on himself, right? I mean, I'm crossing genres, of course, but I think
crossing the streams,
yeah, gotta cross them. I think one of the challenges for game masters coming into some of those other game systems, into STA, is that the work isn't easier to plan. It's just different. Like you don't have to spend time planning your challenge levels, your challenge ratings. You don't have to calculate XP for creatures that your characters are going to face. You don't have to do any of that kind of work. It's just a different kind of work, because you have to kind of like think about what kind of scenes are my characters or the players going to get into, what kind of non-player characters are going to be involved, what are the NPCs' goals, what do they want out of the scenes, and you got a much more narrative kind of theater of the mind perspective. And I know some folks struggle with that, just kind of like just making stuff up as you're going through it. And then the other thing I've noticed a lot on social media is people making the transition from a D20 game into 2D20, right? Everything's completely reversed. So you want to roll low in the system as opposed to rolling high. And if you've been playing, a D20 game forever, it's in your brain to roll high. Like 20s are good, 20s are good, 20s are good. But in this game, ones are good, ones are awesome, right? You want to roll ones as much as possible. And I've noticed some people really struggle. I mean, in some cases it seems simple, but when it's ingrained, it's just really hard to make that flip from rolling 1d20 and rolling high to rolling a minimum of 2d20 and wanting to roll low as much as possible.
One of the things that I've noticed that a lot of the GMs coming from other systems, most of my experience, I played a lot of D&D. Most of my experience was in Shadowrun. Is how the attributes work, because it's virtually impossible to create an STA character who is incompetent. And that's by design, because the lead characters in the shows are all very competent, sometimes only a particular focus, but the attributes are, if you have a 7 in reason, it doesn't mean you're done. It just means you're focusing elsewhere. Whereas a 7 intelligence in D&D or in Shadowrun, that's not good. And separating that mindset. I mean, that's been one of my problems. Is when I'm building characters. Oh no, he's not. He's just better at arm wrestling than he is at crossword puzzles. For lack of a better analogy.
Well, I mean, the analogy too, think about Deanna Troy. She's commanding the Enterprise in an episode. She's a psychiatrist, but they're well-rounded individuals who, if they have to take up the responsibility, they have some training.
Admiral Cornwall in Discovery was a therapist. Mm-hmm. How she got to be a flag officer, I have no idea, but she was a therapist. So I mean, to match that point. But the other thing that I've noticed is that in a lot of other games, there is still, in spite of years of trying to undo it, there is a very much a player versus GM mentality. Mm-hmm. In D&D, you see it all the time. In Shadowrun, you see it not all the time, but a great deal of the time, because the setting is in Shadowrun is very much against you, and you have to kind of unfasten that adversarial relationship with Star Trek Adventures to make it work. I mean, yes, you have you've got the Klingons, you got the Romulans, the Kazon, whoever. But for whatever reason, the mentality has gotten down to the player GM level, and you can make it work in some games, but it does not go well with STA.
There's a dance I dance. I learned to dance with STA to make it very easy. If you, as the new game master, the story's not going where you want it to go, that's why threat is there. Read up on the sections on threat, on how to use threat. That, going back to Jim's tree branch throwing rocks analogy, that my players have learned. Give me threat, get your momentum, go back and forth with it. I mean, it's going like the stock market the entire game. And that's, as a game master, if I want control, I take it that way. And they've learned narratively to use momentum to take it the direction they want to go. So it's fun watching us struggle through that. Going back to Patrick again, it's collaborative. So the threat pool, even though it's called threat, is actually not a threat. It's actually a wonderful tool for game mastering. So that section is one I would say definitely the number one thing. Learn how to use threat, learn how to use momentum before playing your first game, because that's a rich experience.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the places where it's really important as a game master or a prospective game master to be enough of a people person that you can work with your players so that they trust you, right? Because like Patrick said, this is not an adversarial game. It's not a game master with a power trip looking to destroy the player characters and do a total party kill and like, oh yeah, I really got you guys in that session, right? Because like that's not what Star Trek is about. Like if you've watched any of it, it's not really about just killing the characters and having a, I mean, sure, certainly some folks play the game that way. Great, more power to you, have fun. But at its core, the game is not about like I'm gonna throw you into 1,000 Klingons and they're going to destroy you and it's going to be just awesome because I'm going to have so much fun watching you just tear yourself apart. That's not really what we're here for. So, but I have read a lot of just commentary about the game where players are terrified of giving their game master any threat. And I guess maybe because it's called threat, right? But it's not going to hurt you. It's just threat. It's the potential of something bad happening. Not bad, but something more challenging or more complication or just something interesting happening in the story that makes it, more interesting. So it's, you go to the space station and you're talking to the administrator and like, oh, the game master spends some threat and now Klingons are here. Now you've just ratcheted up the tension. You've ratcheted up the storytelling possibilities. You haven't really hurt the player characters. you haven't caused any damage to them. You just made things more complicated. And now the players get to figure out, okay, what do we do? But I think
I want to add on that, Jim.
Yeah, go ahead.
Again, you went straight to Klingons, but I want to say that you can spin that threat to make the administrator your ex-partner.
Oh, sure, yeah, they can do anything with
they're
it.
going to make your job and mission a little bit harder.
Right.
And the complication is attitude, you know? So that's how creative you can get with the spinning of that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can do anything with it. But I think the point I was trying to make is, like, as a player, if you're a prospective player, and of course we're aiming this at Game Masters, but as a Game Master, you need to encourage your players, don't be afraid of giving the Game Master threat. Don't be afraid to spend that momentum. Like, the momentum is a finite resource. You're going to lose a point of it at the end of the scene anyway. So be willing to spend it. Give yourself an advantage. Use it to obtain information. Ask questions. Do stuff with it. There's a whole list of ways you can spend momentum in the book and the reference guides. And then, of course, for Game Masters, there's lots of ways to spend threat to do more things. Bring in some adversaries. Change things up, whatever. But I think to really chip away at that notion that Patrick was talking about the adversarial relationship of the Game Master and the players not being present in this game, just encourage them. Look, here's what threat does. It makes the game cooler. It makes the game more fun. It makes the game more challenging. And of course, at the same time, maybe that's not why your players play the game. And that's where it's important to have a session 0, right? Especially if you're doing a long-term game. Is like, okay, what do you want to get out of the game? Do you like to be challenged? Do you like to have puzzles thrown at you? Because like some folks get anxious about that, right? And totally have to respect that. Like, with people may see, oh, if I give the GM threat, that could be bad. I'm going to be, I may feel anxious about that. How do we work through that? And that's just kind of a game, like, philosophy, like table rules kind of thing that you'd want to discuss with everybody ahead of time.
That was my next question, Jim. So you hit right on it, which was about session 0 and what it is and why it's important, and what are things that you as a game master want to make sure that you hit on when you're sort of having this first meeting with your group. Derek, do you want to start us off?
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, I would say getting to know you, that's what session 0 is really all about. At the base core of it, if you strip it down of everything, it's allowing yourself as game master to start to feel out this world and this universe and how you want to maneuver it and guide your players. For the players, they're putting on new suits. These characters are new. And so everyone's feeling them out. Oh, I like the way this character looks. I like these attributes. Or maybe I don't like some of them, and that's what session 0 does. It allows you to feel all that out. It allows the players, as we did playing, to do your backgrounds, and just for everyone to get familiar and start to get comfortable with the storytelling, with STA game mechanics, and to go back for a second on momentum and threat. Momentum and threat. Even in session 0, momentum and threat, I look at as a storyteller, they are storytelling elements that you can use to propel your story one way or the other. That's what momentum and threat can be used for. It's not adversarial like everyone's saying in regards to the players and the GM. It's just another storytelling element. And so, you could have your players walk into a meeting with an admiral, and maybe the admiral doesn't like Vulcans. Maybe he's got a bias. There's your threat. So there's lots of different ways to think of and use momentum and threat. And in that session 0, everyone starts to feel out. If you're on a new ship, or if you're part of maybe you've been pulled onto a new station. There's so many ways, but just is at the core of it is getting to know you, is getting to feel you as a game master, how you want to go, and the characters to try on these new suits that they've rolled of these player characters.
Well, I'll jump in. So there's a couple of ways you can approach sessions. I think session 0 is really great for if you are looking to run like a short series of episodes, or like one episode over several sessions, or if you're actually looking to attempt a longer term campaign, like you want to get you want to run it for a year or 6 years, or like maybe not quite so ambitious. You don't know how long it's going to go, but you want to run an extended game, as opposed to maybe you're running a convention experience, or maybe you're running a one shot, like literally you and your friends are together. You got a couple hours. They want to try out Star Trek Adventures. you might not have time for a full-blown session 0. So you'll have to compress as much as you can into like 15, 20 minutes before you actually start the game. And maybe you're using pre-gen characters or something. But I mean, obviously for session 0 or for like a, moment 0 before actually doing the con game, you want to establish the table rules, right? So you want to say, okay, this is a Star Trek game. We're going to make it PG-13. We're not going to focus on, we don't want, or, as a game master, I don't game master situations that involve child abuse, animal abuse, rape, forced, whatever. We're just, none of that's going to be present in the game. If you like that kind of stuff, great, but this isn't the game for you. So either just like let it go and play the game with us, or go find another game that might suit you better. That's totally okay. We're establishing the ground rules at the very beginning. And then I would say, go around the table. Okay, what kind of things do you simply not want to see in a game? Like maybe you're really bothered by, I don't know, I mean, whatever, like anything, literally, but have that conversation among the group, establish those table rules right away, and then you can start playing the game. Now, if you're doing a session 0 for like a longer term game, that gives you more room to do stuff, right? You can actually have character generation together as a group, which I think is a great way to get into the meat of the game, because it's such a storytelling focused game. Is like literally have a copy of the core book, or whatever reference sheets you need, or the free character builder app that's available online, right? And have everybody work through the life path together, right? Maybe you establish the ground rules even. Like the game master, you might have a concept for your game. Like, I want to run an original series game on a brand new Constitution class ship. We're going to explore deep space. That's the primary purpose. We're going to explore deep space. And if the players are on board with that, then you know that you're building original series characters intended for a deep space exploration game. So you all work through the life path together. And I think that gives you an opportunity to start building character elements between each other. Like, oh, maybe there's a common experience at the academy, or maybe you were on the same ship together that blew up and then you've transferred and moved on. So because this is such a storytelling heavy game, having everybody go through the life path together instead of just showing up to the game with a pre-made character, I think really you can start building that the narrative threads right from the very beginning.
Real story. I wanted my two teenage nephews to play, along with a friend who's so into Star Trek, never played the RPG, and another friend who watched the show, never played RPG before. And we started session 0 with the life path generator app. Yeah. And we all went through, because it's so intuitive. And by the end of it, they had decided who hates who likes who's tired of who should have been removed from, rank in their mat. And it was just hilarious. And so by the time we played a space station based game, by the time we threw them on the station, there was just so much personality and inside jokes. Somebody even had a pet rabbit that came out of Life Path Generator. And so there was just all this personality. So I really do, Jim, good suggestion. It's at Modiphius. You can get to the Life Path Generator. That's a great place to start as a new GM and new players.
Yeah. And if you're at all familiar with, and I'm going back a little bit because they did this especially for next gen DS9 and Voyager. Like, if you remember that for the TV shows, they would create a series Bible, and in those series Bibles were a paragraph description for each character and how those characters are interrelated with the other characters. And that's kind of what you're doing in session 0, is you're building these characters, you're building the series Bible basically. And you're coming up with kind of like the sketches of each of these characters, and you're also starting to build connection points to the other characters. It might completely change once you actually start, doing the episodes and getting into the game itself. Just like the writers are discovering the characters, the actors are discovering the characters, and it all just builds as the season or the series goes on. And you can do that exact same thing in a Star Trek game, Star Trek Adventures game. Is that session 0 can kind of like create the baseline for everybody. And then from there, the game master and the players just build on it, and you just come up with amazing, crazy things. But as a game master and as a player, I've discovered that I really love session 0 because it kind of like lays the whole foundation out for where you're gonna go, and a strong foundation just makes a better house.
Can I just say, to jump on to what Jim said real quick, is that I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh my God, what Jim and Michael and everybody's saying, session 0 is your pilot for your show, right? So, I mean, you think about Voyager, we brought up Voyager. I know a lot of people like Voyager, before they got thrown to the other side of the galaxy, they had their session 0, right? All pilots have their session 0. So if you like a particular genre or era of Star Trek, watch that pilot, you know, and you pretty much see what a session zero is like. Is people getting to know each other before they're thrown into something. So you can think about it like that.
So I'm curious, what do you keep for as far as like documents or resources as a GM, as far as keeping track of things, and what would you recommend for a new GM who's trying this to maybe focus on?
Wondering why we're all laughing. I think are we all laughing because we're probably overly excessive?
Maybe just a little.
Maybe.
I'm gonna skip this question just for the fact that I write up every single one of my episodes in novella format, so that people can go back and read it like a novel. And I go back and edit it over the years, so they just get better and better. So I'm stepping out of it. I'm excessive. Let's give them just the basics of what they need.
Well, I'll jump in, Michael, because I'm exactly the same way. I've been playing some form of Star Trek game RPG for 32 years now, 33 years, maybe longer, even before FASA, doing homebrewed stuff, then FASA, and then homebrewed stuff, and then Last Unicorn Games, Decipher Games, et cetera, and now STA. And my co-GM and I, back in the day, we kept meticulous notes. So not only do I have the notes for like, oh, here's the session, here's the episode ideas I have, and here's how it actually played out, because I always take notes during the sessions too, just so I can remember what happened. And then of course, then we would go back and we would write a full-blown synopsis of how everything came out with what the players did and everything else. And then with the advent of technology, we were able to start recording the session so that I could actually hear and remember everything that was said, and I could start adding in nuances. Oh, this character said this and this character said that and blah, blah, blah. And so I'm not going to pull it, but I've got a 4-inch binder on my shelf that has literally everything that I've done for Star Trek for the last 30 odd years. Like all the failed campaigns that lasted like 2 episodes, all the campaigns that were like 1 episode or half an episode that we started and then kind of gave up, or started to give up, or life happened or whatever. There's non-player characters in there. There's character sheets. There's just all kinds of stuff in this binder. It's basically my holy grail. But I've kept it. And now that now that technology has advanced so much, like I use Roll20 for my online games. And I record everything. I record all the sessions. So I've got, recordings for like the last year and a half worth of games. And each session is like 3 hours. And I haven't figured out a good way to transcribe that stuff yet, other than just listening to it and typing it, which is horribly, horribly inefficient. And I just haven't found a better system yet. But at some point, all that stuff's going to get transcribed. And I'm going to have this huge, beautiful body of notes for the last game I've been running. And then I'll be able to massage that and turn it into like an ebook or something. I don't know. But yes, I keep exhaustive notes of everything. And as a pack rat, I can't throw anything away. So like, I'll stop. I promise. The only thing I'll say is like the first set of notes that my co-GM and I made so long ago, we actually had a dot matrix printer, right? The old school dot matrix printers where you had to tear off the side, because the things on the side would kind of like, would kind of cycle through, and the ink on those were so old school that some of the synopses for the episodes has faded so much that if I don't transcribe those soon, I'm not going to be able to read them anymore, because we've lost the WordPerfect files or whatever crappy word processor we were using back in '91. We don't have the software anymore. We don't have the files anymore. All we have is this paper copy that is fading, and like not an archaeologist, but like an old school person going, like Gandalf going into the archives of Gondor, right? Looking at the notes with a candle behind the paper, trying to decipher what is read. I need to hurry up and transcribe them.
We'll just call them the dead Trek scrolls for now.
Yeah.
So my one piece of advice I would say, Kelly's actually stepped in on one of my games on Discord, and since I'm running it on Discord constantly, I cut, paste, and edit. And for those of you who really want an easy way to transcribe, if you do choose to play by Discord, there's an article on continuing missions about how to do it effectively. That for me has saved my life, because before I'd play a game for 4 hours, take notes, and then go sit there at the computer and type out the story. Now it's cut, paste, edit.
Nice.
Any other thoughts on that subject about note taking or record keeping or resources that you pull together, you know, for the game itself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll just add, and it's only because Kelly, you and I were having this conversation the other day, because we were talking about, you know, we've been playing online for so long, and now some people are starting to transition back to in person, and what a different experience it is to play online versus in person. Like playing on Roll20 has been a revelation for me, because like I can find a picture on the internet, drop it right into Roll20, the players see it, you're good to go. But in person, it's a little harder, because that means as a game master, I either need to prepare ahead of time and print off that picture or bring it with me or somehow make it available so that when we're at the game table, I can say, hey, you see this character, and I can show you the picture, or I can show you, you know, I can pick up my phone and show you the picture. It's just, it's different than just like, you know, switching the screen on Roll20 and saying, okay, here's what you see. Here's the environment. Here's a picture. Here's, you know, whatever. And so it's tricky to think about that as a game master. It's like, how much preparation do you want to put into it? Because honestly, Star Trek Adventures, it's theater of the mind, so you don't need battle maps, you don't need pictures necessarily. It's just whatever you come up with your mind. But I know it helps players to see the visual representation of that. So there's that thing to think about. And then the other thing is, of course, with playing online, it's so much easier to record the sessions, record the notes, do that kind of stuff. And especially for me, like Michael and Patrick and Derek and Kelly, I don't know how you work as a game master, but when I'm running Star Trek Adventures, I would say probably 60 to 75% of the session is completely made up in the moment, right? Like I've got my outline of how the episode's probably going to flow, but there is so much stuff made up in the moment because the players are making up stuff and I'm making up stuff. And sometimes the story will go in a completely different direction than I intended, but it's better, right? Because we're collaboratively doing it. I've discovered that if I don't record that session, I'm going to forget all the great stuff that happened, which is why I really need that. I need that recording so that I can go back and listen to it and go, oh yeah, this is where we went. This is where we strayed off my outline, which is cool. And then we did even better stuff. But what was it that this character said, or what was it that this character did? What specific action did they take here? What complications came up in the game that I forgot about that I can add in later, and they can go back and go, oh, hey, that happened back two sessions ago. And then I'll look awesome because they'll think I planted it. But in reality, I'm just, refreshing my memory, basically. So I would use the technology tools as much as possible if you can as a game master. Once you get into it, like don't worry about it for your first session, but just think about all the tools that are available to you now as opposed to 30 years ago.
So kind of as like a final question here, if there are aspiring GMs listening who are maybe overwhelmed and this sounds like a lot of moving parts, I think Patrick did a good job of boiling down, like you need to understand how tasks work and you need to understand momentum and threat. What are sort of the minimum number of things that GMs are responsible for while running a session, or that they need to sort of keep in mind and make sure that they're doing to move the session forward?
So go ahead, Patrick. I see your.
No, I'm just like, wow, that's a.
So everyone watches TV. The one good thing about we know, anybody picking up this game most likely watches TV, loves movies, and so they know the power of the cutscene. So the worst thing is that when it goes on and on and on, and like, what do we do now? Honestly, every single time we're playing, when something happens, something just a little shocking, a little different, I call a cutscene. And then when I say, how would this resolve? And we're not going to see the resolution in this scene. We're going to talk about it in the next scene, because maybe you show up in the captain's ready room. It's like, you won't believe what just happened with the ambassador from Sharnak. And the power of the cutscene, my players love it. It's like this drop the mic moment. So if I was going to say, keep it as simple, the minimum they need to know is as you're going through it, when you get the laugh, when you get the shock, stop. Talk about it as a group. Move on, because it's about the story. It's not about the mechanics. It's not about hit points. It's about the story.
Cool. So stay focused on the story and harness the power of ending a scene when something cool is happening.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I'd even take it up a level. So like obviously, knowing when a scene ends is super important for a writer, right? Because as we're writing, we might write past the ending of the scene because we're just trying to get all the words out, and then we go back and edit, and we're like, oh, actually, the scene ended 2 pages earlier. and I can cut out all that dross and move on. But in a role-playing session, it's a little harder to see that sometimes. And sometimes players will just kind of like linger and keep asking questions like, wait a minute, no, the scene ended, 5 minutes ago, let's move on. But I think ultimately, like in answer to your question, Kelly, I think the game master's job ultimately, more than anything else, is to make sure everybody's having fun, right? So learn how to read the room, learn how to read your players just enough so that like if someone's is sitting there glazed over, looking bored, maybe they're looking at their phone, maybe they're looking at anything else in the room that isn't the game, keep things on track, make sure everybody's having fun, because ultimately this is a game, right? So you're here to have fun with your friends and tell a cool Star Trek story together. So ultimately, I think the game master, more than anything else, has to make sure that everybody's having a good time. If something has happened in the game that has triggered somebody and they're not talking about it because they want to be polite or whatever, or they're just embarrassed to bring it up, try to focus on that and say, okay, let's take a pause, everybody take a deep breath, and then let's talk about what just happened in the game. Like, did this make somebody uncomfortable? Without, don't call them out, right? You don't want to make them more uncomfortable, right? But it's just like generally talk about what's going on. But I think the game master is a facilitator. You're there to facilitate the fun for everybody, and and not to scare anybody. But again, you use the most basic part of the rule system first, and then you can just add on as you go. Because like Nathan Dowdell developed an amazing game system for us that has so many tools in it that like I'm not sure that there's any game master that is using the entire full-blown rule set as it is. I mean, Nathan might be. I don't know for sure, but you can use as much or as little of the rule set as you want in your game, whatever you're comfortable with, whatever it takes for you to tell awesome Star Trek stories with your game players, with your group. That's all you need, right? And not to belabor the point, but you also, as a game master, of course, it's a truism for the internet, right? Like, don't let the people on the internet tell you that you're doing it wrong, right? There is no wrong way to play this game. You play it the way you want to play it, and that's right for you. Because there are plenty of people online. I mean, this is true for anything, not just Star Trek, but just in general. They'll tell you that you're doing something wrong, and you just have to learn how to ignore them, right? Like oh, they'll say, oh, that's not canon, blah 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 blah, or this show sucks, blah 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 blah, and you're playing the game wrong because you should be doing this and this on rule. Page 47 of the book, it tells you this or whatever. And it's like, no, this is how we're running it for our game and it works for us. And just, like filter out the noise and figure out what works for you and your group, and then just have a heck of a lot of fun with it.
I want to flip to the positive of the social media side, though. I know we're coming up on time here, but I want to flip that. If you are game mastering for the very first time, you can find all of us plus hundreds of other awesome game masters on social media, Facebook, Twitter. You can go to Star Trek Adventures page on Facebook. You can go to Reddit. You can go to the Modifius forum. And we actually help each other out. I game master games, and sometimes I hope my players don't see it because they're all over the social media. But I'll sometimes say like, what do you do, or what year did the Cardassians do this? And now I'm like, oh no, they're going to know I'm doing something with Cardassians. But the response and help I get from everybody, ship stats, person stats, pointing me in the right direction, will help you game master to be successful. Because the more game masters we have, the more players we have, and you can teach them to be game masters, and it goes on and on.
Mm-hmm.
I will add, just as a player that I've had the honor of playing in several different games with different game masters, and it's been really cool just to see the different styles and the different ways that different people approach running STA. So I think that's also a cool thing to do if you are like me and hoping to GM soon. Watching several different people knock this out of the park is pretty cool. So I think we are down to the wire here. Michael, yes?
Yeah, that was awesome. Kelly, wow, that was so fun to be interviewed. It was like someone taking the game mastering and letting me play it for once. This was awesome. So I appreciate Kelly. You did a great job.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it was fun.
Fun. Thank you, everybody. I know this year's going to be a big year for Modifius with a lot of cool stuff coming out. It's only getting better. So if you ever have any questions, we're all accessible, like I said, all over social media. And we'd be happy to talk to you more about the experience of Game Master.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. A lot of fun.
Be well. Live long and prosper.
That's right.